South Park makes fun of everyone, from Britney Spears during her crisis, showing her trying to take her own life but failing and surviving. And that's not even the most controversial part, because if there's one thing that defines South Park, is that it holds nothing back. They've made fun of people with disabilities, African Americans, Jews, gays, and the poor. They've joked about 9/11, the Holocaust, and even about God being intimate with Satan.
According to South Park, COVID started with a threesome: Mickey Mouse, a man, and a pangolin. And yet, they haven't been canceled. In a world where people get canceled over any comment on social media, South Park has been on the air for 25 years, uncensored and unapologetic. So what is it about the show that makes it untouchable? What's the secret behind its immunity? Could it be that, even though we act proper on the outside, something in us connects with this kind of humor?
Could it be that even if it makes us uncomfortable, we need a space where the unspeakable can be said? Today we're going to explore whether South Park is really as cruel as it seems, or if, no matter how uncomfortable it is to admit, it might be the kind of humor many need to survive an absurd and painful world. Sam asks for permission to go to the movies with his friends. They're going to watch a foreign film from Canada. His mom agrees, and as she watches him walk away, she sighs and says her son is such an angel. She's so happy to live in that peaceful little town full of good Christian people. She walks past Kenny, but his mom stops her, yelling,
"Where do you think you're going? You have to go to church. If you don't, you're going to burn in hell." Still, the kids manage to get out. They run into a homeless man and do what any well-mannered child in their little town would do: avoid him. They pass by Kyle, and his mom, Sheila, tells them to be careful. The world isn't what it used to be. Then they pick up Cartman, and now the group is complete.
They happily head to the movies, where they can learn everything their parents don't have the time or desire to teach them. They ask for tickets to see Terrence and Phillip, but there's a problem. It's rated R, and since they're underage, they're not allowed in. So they do the most logical thing. They offer the homeless man $10 to pretend to be their responsible adult. And it works.
The movie is completely inappropriate. Dirty jokes and curse words every 2 seconds. And the kids are obviously thrilled. To them, it's art, like they've been given access to a forbidden world. They start spitting out curse words with a fluency they didn't even know they had. They meet up with their friends and show off their new language.
Everyone is left speechless and runs straight to the theater. The next day, the entire school is talking the same way. Curse words in the hallways, at recess, and in class. They call the moms in. They're horrified. Those Canadians have ruined their precious children. The town goes into crisis. News reports start asking if that movie is destroying the youth, and for some reason, the report is delivered by a man in a bikini?
Sheila, Kyle's mom, becomes the face of the movement. She appears on TV blaming the Canadians. Canada's Minister of Film responds, saying the movie wasn't meant for children. And besides, the US has movies 10 times more violent, so why are they so shocked by a few bad words? Sheila ignores him and keeps insisting that the Canadians are evil.
With all the uproar, the school gives in to the pressure. They organize a rehabilitation program to teach the kids how to speak without using bad words. They're given an official list of acceptable translations. Instead of saying, "kiss by buns," they should say, "you're a bunshole." Instead of "holy shit," they're told to say, "what the hell?" And if they want to say, "are you shitting me?" they should go with "no way." According to the principal, this is now considered respectful speech. He assures everyone that with this approach, kids will avoid drugs, stay out of trouble, and not end up in jail. The friends leave rehab and head straight to the theater to watch Terrence and Phillip again. In one scene, the characters set themselves on fire with a match. Cartman bets Kenny that would never happen in real life. Kenny tries it, and it does happen. He catches fire and dies. This is how the moms find out the kids watch the movie again. They're furious and punish them. Not for getting Kenny killed, but for disobeying.
South Park is a satire. It's crude, absurd, and politically incorrect, but it's also honest. This kind of comedy exaggerates what already exists in reality.
Lying politicians, religions full of contradictions, ridiculous trends, broken healthcare systems, schools that teach the bare minimum, and the absurdity of human behavior.
It makes fun of all this. Not just to make us laugh,
but to make us stop and see how illogical, unfair, and contradictory the world can be, to make us question things.
In this movie, for example, South Park exposes the double standards of many conservative communities in the United States, places that present themselves as very proper, very religious, and good.
But if we look closely, there's something that doesn't add up. Stan's mom, for example, is convinced she lives in a little town full of good people and that her son is a little angel. But seconds later, we saw a homeless man lying in the street, and that little angel paid him $10 to pretend to be his guardian so he could get into the movie. The town isn't that good, and her son isn't that innocent.
But she prefers to believe it's true, because accepting otherwise would mean facing problems she doesn't want to see.
Maybe admitting her son isn't who she thinks he is would force her to question herself as a mother. Kenny's mom, on the other hand, calls herself a good Christian, but when her son wanted to go out, she yelled that if he didn't go to church, he'd burn in hell. Christianity preaches love and compassion, but in that moment, she used religion as a weapon of control. Then, when the kids started cursing, the entire town went into a panic.
But when Kenny died brutally, no one cared. A curse word shocked them, but the death of a child went unnoticed? It's easier to be outraged by foul language than to face the pain and harshness of that death and ask why their community is like that.
And the truth is, many times we get outraged by the superficial just to avoid facing the deeper, more uncomfortable issues underneath.
The superficial becomes a scapegoat. It's more comfortable to get outraged because someone said, "I'm so screwed," than to ask why a child dies and no one cares. It's easier to blame Canada for the kids' behavior than to take a hard look at how they're being raised at home. It's simpler to feel morally superior because the kids speak politely than to question what values they're truly being taught. Instead of facing the real underlying problem, the big solution they came up with was to teach the kids to change.
Holy shit becomes what the hell? Or kiss my buns becomes you're a bunshole. And they believe that with that, they've fulfilled their role as parents. But changing a word doesn't change what's underneath. It doesn't make anyone a better person. It's just makeup to maintain the illusion that everything's fine. And that's where the genius of South Park lies.
While other shows try to talk about these issues seriously, and many people get bored or feel like they're being scolded,
But South Park makes you laugh, and when you laugh, you let your guard down. You no longer feel attacked or judged, and in that moment of laughter, maybe you realize that a lot of the rules we follow don't make sense, that we ignore serious problems, and that, to some extent, we all have our contradictions. That's why I believe that, as strange as it may sound, shows like South Park have value. Through humor, they force us to look at what we usually avoid. I think what's truly uncomfortable isn't the curse words, it's the issues those curse words point to. If after watching the whole movie, the only thing that bothers you is the bad language, but not what's underneath,
Or maybe you're missing the most important point they're trying to make. You'd be doing the same thing the parents in the story did, getting outraged by the easiest thing while ignoring what truly matters. Later on, we'll understand that this movie, at its core, is a metaphor for the attacks and censorship South Park has faced for years.
And now, one question remains. Is it okay to make fun of everything? Are there things we should never joke about? Or is that exactly where we need laughter the most? I'll talk to you more about that a little later on.
Kenny's soul rises to heaven, but since he cursed and didn't go to church, he's denied entry. The boy ends up burning in hell. Sheila calls a meeting to find a solution, which really means finding someone to blame. Some suggest blaming the government, others blame society.
one person suggests that maybe the parents themselves are to blame. But Sheila's not having it. Without hesitation, she proposes blaming Canada. Everyone loves the idea, after all, they're not even a real country. And just like that, the Mothers Against Canada Association is born. They print banners, hand out flyers, and even get t-shirts made that say, "Eliminate Canada."
When Terrence and Philip appear on a television show, Sheila storms in with soldiers and orders their arrest. Canada is outraged and, in response, bombs the home of Hollywood actor Alec Baldwin. The President of the United States declares war and announces that Terrence and Philip will be executed. Leading the project is his new Secretary of Defense, Sheila.
Meanwhile, in hell, Kenny wakes up surrounded by fire, screams, and tortured souls. He meets Satan, but instead of being terrifying, Satan is insecure and submissive. He's in a toxic relationship with Saddam Hussein, the dictator of Iraq. Saddam manipulates him, humiliates him, and mocks him, but Satan doesn't dare stand up to him.
On Earth, Cartman tells Kyle that all of this is his mom's fault, that she's a total Sheila. Sheila overhears him, and Cartman is toast. At the next Mothers Against Canada meeting, Sheila announces that everything is ready for the elimination of Terrence and Philip, but she also presents a new solution to stop kids from cursing.
Implant a chip in their brains that delivers an electric shock every time they curse. Sheila presents the first test subject. Cartman says a curse word and the chip activates, shocking him. Within seconds, he stops swearing. The experiment works, and the moms applaud like they've just saved the world. Kyle and Stan try to talk to their moms. They want to make them see they can't let Terrence and Philip be executed, but the moms won't listen. They just keep repeating the same thing over and over, that they have to protect their children, that their kids are the most precious thing they have, that they're safeguarding their future. Realizing there's no way to change their minds, the boys decide to take matters into their own hands. They form their own movement, the Resistance, and send the message out to all the kids in the neighborhood.
They have to save Terrence and Philip. Meanwhile, in hell, Kenny spies on Satan and Saddam lying in bed. He overhears them talking about ancient prophecies. If the blood of the Canadians touches U.S. soil, it will trigger the apocalypse, World War III, and the end of the world. Kenny panics, ascends to Earth, and appears to Cartman.
He warns him that if Terrence and Philip die, Satan and Saddam will take over the planet. Cartman rushes to tell Kyle and Stan, and at the Resistance meeting they come up with a plan to stop the execution. The event will take place during a special show filled with celebrities and broadcast live across the country. But none of them have any idea how to organize a rescue, so they're given some advice.
If they want to succeed, they need to find El Topo. Meanwhile, the U.S. military prepares to invade Canada. The general starts assigning roles. Battalion 5 raises their hand. All African-American soldiers. Their role will be crucial. They'll serve as the human shield. Then it's Battalion 14's turn, made up of white soldiers.
Their instruction: stand behind the darker-skinned soldiers. One of the Battalion 5 soldiers speaks up. Have you ever heard of the Emancipation Proclamation? The general looks confused and replies, I don't listen to hip-hop.
At first glance, this sequence seemed like a racist joke.
African Americans up front used as cannon fodder, and then the white soldiers behind.
For some, this kind of joke crosses a line that should never be crossed. But before canceling it, it's worth looking at the context.
If we understand where it's coming from, we can see that the movie isn't making fun of African American people themselves, but rather the unfair treatment they've historically faced. The joke exaggerates something that, sadly, has actually happened.
And that, many believe, is still happening today. And I want you to pay close attention here. In many wars and dangerous jobs, those who ended up on the front lines were, and often still are, African American or Latino individuals. For example, during the Vietnam War, even though African Americans made up only 11% of the U.S. population, they accounted for 25 to 30% of the combat soldiers, with higher participation and disproportionately more casualties. Dr. Martin Luther King even called Vietnam a white man's war and a black man's fight.
Something similar happened during the Gulf War, where more than 24% of the troops deployed were African American. And nearly 30% of the soldiers called to fight on the ground were also African American, disproportionately so.
So it seems that South Park is actually calling out racism, not making fun of the people who suffer from it. Maybe what makes people uncomfortable is that it does it through jokes, and that can sound like mockery or disrespect. But laughing at something doesn't mean you don't take it seriously. In fact, many times it's the opposite. Humor allows us to acknowledge something painful that we might not be able to face otherwise.
Look, I'm not saying that every joke in this series is defensible, or that everyone has to like this kind of humor. And if you don't, then you're the problem. Not at all. I don't want to be misunderstood.
I completely understand that the way South Park handles certain topics doesn't sit well with many people, and that's perfectly okay. Not everyone has to like it. But think about this.
For many people who would otherwise never stop to question or reflect on certain issues, some of these jokes might be exactly what gets them to think.
Sometimes humor, even the uncomfortable kind, can open a door that would otherwise stay shut.
In hell, Satan tries to have a serious conversation with Saddam, but Saddam ignores him. He's only interested in sex and is already tired. Satan walks away. That's when Kenny appears. He's been watching everything. He tells Satan he doesn't have to keep putting up with that he deserves better. For the first time, Satan feels like someone truly hears him. He thanks Kenny and decides to stand up to Saddam.
He tells Saddam he doesn't want his help to rule anymore, but Saddam plays the victim. He promises he'll change. Satan believes him and forgives him. Meanwhile, Stan, Cartman, and Kyle manage to find El Topo. To their surprise, he's not some expert or warrior. He's just a kid like them. Still, they include him in the plan. The execution show for Terrence and Philip kicks off with a big spectacle.
Winona Ryder throws ping pong balls and a dog named Jeffy performs tricks to entertain the audience. Sheila steps onto the stage and addresses the troops. Remember, terrible and deplorable violence is fine, as long as no one says any bad words. That's what this war is about.
The kids manage to sneak into the event. Cartman has a key mission: disable the alarm so El Topo can rescue the comedians. But just as he's about to do it, Kenny appears. He warns him that Satan and Saddam are on their way. Cartman panics, runs off to warn the others, and forgets to disable the alarm.
The mole is discovered. Guard dogs chase and attack him. He's severely injured and dies. Now the execution begins. Desperate, the kids try to reason with their moms. They tell Sheila that Satan and Saddam are about to arrive, but she doesn't believe them. She gives the order to electrocute the comedians and chaos erupts.
Canada drops bombs on the stage. The United States responds with its army. In the middle of the chaos, Cartman manages to free Terrence and Philip, but because of the electric shock, the chip implanted in him starts to malfunction. The Mothers Against Canada watch the disaster unfold. All they wanted was a cleaner, safer world for their children. Now, some of them begin to doubt.
They tell Sheila that it's enough, that if they keep going like this, their kids could die. But Sheila doesn't stop. She stands alongside the soldiers, right in front of Terrence and Philip, ready to shoot. Then, Kyle steps forward, placing himself between his mom and the comedians. He tells her he's not moving, that he won't let her see them eliminated.
The general tries to convince him, saying there are plenty of other silly movies he can watch. But Kyle responds that it's not about that. It's about freedom, expression, and the right to say what you think, even if some people don't like it.
As I mentioned before, the entire storyline of Terrence and Philip being censored for swearing is a direct metaphor for the attacks and censorship South Park has faced since its inception.
Since the very first episode, Trey Parker and Matt Stone have been accused of being vulgar, disrespectful, and offensive. They've faced criticism, complaints, hate mail, threats, and countless attempts at censorship from religious groups, parent associations, and even governments. Countries like Mexico, Italy, and China have gone as far as to cut scenes, censor episodes, or completely remove the show from their television. But deep down, all these groups are doing the same thing Sheila does in the movie. They want to decide what can and can't be said, what can and can't be seen, who gets to speak and who should stay silent. They get outraged over superficial things like a curse word or an uncomfortable joke, but ignore far deeper and more serious problems.
As we saw, while the whole town was up in arms over kids saying bad words, they ignored the fact that a child died in a brutal way. And instead of asking themselves what they were doing wrong as a community, they chose to blame Canada or a couple of TV comedians just to avoid facing their own problems.
And in doing so, it showed us just how ridiculous it is to try to solve deep problems with superficial solutions.
Censoring a word won't change the reality that hides behind that word. That's why censorship and so-called political correctness are sometimes not tools of justice, but forms of evasion. They only put makeup on injustice to make it easier to look at. They don't solve the problems.
They only hide them so we don't feel uncomfortable. And covering up what's uncomfortable only helps to keep it going. They expect that if no one says anything offensive, then the world will be a more decent place. But that's false. The world doesn't get better just because we stop saying bad words. The world gets better when we are able to recognize what's broken and dare to face it. And in that sense, as absurd as it may sound, South Park's jokes can be more useful for social change than all of cancel culture combined. Because even though they're rude or uncomfortably true, they don't avoid talking about difficult topics. On the contrary, they bring them to light. And by doing so with humor, they allow more people to start noticing those injustices, to talk about them, question them, and in some cases, take action.
Meanwhile, cancel culture does the opposite. It shuts down conversation, eliminates the opportunity to debate and understand, and with that, it also closes the possibility of changing anything.
What's ruder? Saying a bad word or ignoring the real injustices happening while we get scandalized by that word?
And I want you to pay attention from here on out, because censorship focuses on what is said. South Park focuses on what is left unsaid. And that's why, in a world where everyone wants to look correct, maybe we need shows that, even if they're uncomfortable, Ku turns to his mom and says, "When I got into trouble, you never talked to me. You just looked for someone to blame. Mom, stop fighting for causes." The soldiers fall silent. They know Ku is right, but Sheila refuses to back down. She picks up the gun and fires, hitting the comedians in the forehead. They drop to the ground and their blood starts to spill. Stan panics and yells at his mom. Sheila, who just killed 2 men, turns to him and says, "Young man, what's your language?"
The spilled blood fulfills the prophecy. Satan and Saddam emerge from the underworld and appear before everyone. They look straight at Sheila and tell her that by killing an innocent, she has opened the door to the end of the world. Sheila tries to justify herself, saying she only wanted a better world for the children. But Saddam explains that with that good intention, she filled everything with intolerance and hate, and that was exactly what allowed them to enter.
Saddam orders that everyone must bow before him. Satan is offended and reminds him that the true Lord of evil is himself, but Saddam just laughs and humiliates him in front of everyone. Then he turns to Cartman and calls him fat. Cartman gets angry and insults him. His chip sends an electric shock, but since it's malfunctioning, it hits Saddam instead.
Then a light bulb goes off in his head. He starts saying curse words, one after another. And again, the dictator gets shocked. All bruised and furious, Saddam yells at Satan, "You're useless! Help me!" But Satan's had enough. He says, "That's it!" grabs him and throws him back into hell. Saddam lands on a rock and dies impaled. Satan finally feels free. He turns to Kenny and thanks him for opening his eyes.
As a gesture, he offers to grant him one wish. Kenny asks for everything to go back to how it was before the war. They remind him that this means he would still be dead. Even so, Kenny nods, says goodbye to his friends, and disappears. Satan gathers up all the chaos and takes it with him. The world calms down, Terrence and Philip come back to life, and everything returns to normal.
She hugs Kyle and apologizes for not being there for him. Kyle says, "After all, what saved us were Cartman's curse words." Suddenly, the kids look up to the sky and see a bright light shooting up from the earth. It's Kenny, now with wings and a halo. His sacrifice for others opened the gates of heaven for him.
And so we come back to the million-dollar question. Why hasn't South Park been canceled?
After so many jokes that many consider offensive, after making fun of everything and everyone, how is it still on the air? My opinion, even if it sounds strange, is that South Park hasn't survived despite cancel culture, but partly because of it. Why? Because we live in a world where, on social media and off, everyone tries to look correct, progressive, empathetic, flawless, where sometimes looking good matters more than being good. And South Park doesn't play that game. It stays brutally honest. It doesn't tell you how you should be. It shows you how we really are, most of the time. Selfish, impulsive, prejudiced, full of contradictions. Able to get outraged because a kid says a bad word, but stay indifferent when that same kid dies. Or capable of demanding justice while ignoring the person next to us who needs help. Of calling ourselves compassionate while using religion to control others. And in the middle of so much correctness, South Park gives a lot of people permission to drop the act, to stop pretending, to laugh at their own uncomfortable sides without having to apologize for existing. And what about you? Do you think South Park is just a disrespectful show that shouldn't exist anymore? Or is it an uncomfortable mirror we actually need? I'd love to read your thoughts in the comments.
Well, if you're seeing this, it means you watched the whole video. Thank you for that. If you haven't subscribed yet, now's a great time. It really helps me out, and you won't miss any future videos. That's it for now. See you in the next one.